Hi, I'm Kevin Gillespie. I'm here today with my friends from Coke to show you my famous Coca-Cola braised pot roast. This comes from my book, Fire in My Belly. It starts with this cut of beef right here. This is a beef chuck. It's not expensive. You can find it in every grocery store across the U.S. So we're going to start with this right here, take it over to the heat, and we're going to put it on and let it start getting a nice dark golden brown color. High heat, let our pan start to warm up, and we're going to use grapeseed oil today. And the reason for that is that grapeseed oil, for one, has absolutely no flavor. The other is that it has a really high smoke point, which means that it can tolerate extremely high heat. So let's add our oil to our pan while it's cool. We're not frying it by any stretch of the imagination, but we need a little bit of oil in the bottom of this pan. We're going to take our piece of meat. We're going to season it pretty aggressively with salt and pepper. I'm also going to take a paper towel and blot off the surface before we put it in here. One of the little chefy tricks that we do in the restaurant all the time is if there's any moisture on the surface of this piece of meat, that's going to prohibit the browning. So salt, some black pepper, and then blot it dry. Be very careful so you don't burn yourself. Set this in the pan and lay it away from yourself. Let's talk about what's going to go in the pan. Classically, pot roast has a few different vegetables in it that it pretty much always has, regardless of what part of the country you're in, and that's what we have in front of us here. The French call this mirepoix, but it is carrots, onion, and celery. Now, where I make a big difference is that rather than taking these, cooking them, and then serving those vegetables, we cook brand new vegetables and bring those in and serve them fresh, and there's a reason for that. Those vegetables are going to exude all of their flavor into our sauce that we cook the meat in. But if we serve those, they won't taste like anything. They've given up every bit of flavor they possibly can. And so we're going to bring brand new fresh stuff to it. So I like a fairly coarse chop, and so that means with our carrots, kind of into a thick coin here, we need 1 carrot for this. We also need about half of an onion. My preferred onion for this recipe is going to be a Vidalia onion. I think that the sweetness that a Vidalia brings to it is much nicer than a Spanish white onion or even a yellow onion. We need about half of an onion for this. So I'm going to cut this into just some big wedges here. Again, as we're not serving these vegetables, we're not really concerned with them being in bite-sized pieces. And then I'm going to split it 1 time lengthwise here so that we have a little bit more surface area so that flavor can leach out into the sauce. Finally, 1 stalk of celery, cut all the way up to the leaves. You can absolutely keep these and throw them in there. These little small leaves are not going to hurt anything. They're just going to bring more flavor to it. So let's go over here and take a look in the pan, and I'm going to show you what's the most important step of the entire process. That's browning the meat. When we lay this into the pan, we can start to see a little bit of caramelization build up around the edges. And the easiest way to see that is looking right down at the very bottom of this. When you start to see that first kind of 1/4 inch turn a nice deep golden brown color, so this is absolutely a step that you cannot miss. Taking care not to burn ourselves, we're going to flip this away, because otherwise that oil can rush up and burn your hands, and we don't want to have that happen. Now this color is what we're looking for right here. We'll call it deep golden brown, dark golden brown. If it's too light, it's not going to produce the end result that we want. And so we always go a little darker than you would normally think so that the end result is that perfect deep golden brown color. Right now, we've cooked 1. We're on to the second side, and most people would think, I browned it, we're good. But we're completely forgetting these sides right here, these 2 big edges. And so we'll want to stand them up on those sides and get a little bit of color there as well before we move on to our next step. And as you can see, this happens rather quickly. Once we got that color on that side, tip this back down. Let's cut our stove off and grab some towels so that we can carry it over here to the work table. All right, so I'm going to bring it over here so you guys can see it. Now, as you can see, this shrinks down pretty quick. Now I'm going to add our vegetables to it. Drop them in the pan, kind of scatter them around. This exposure to the fat is going to help draw those aromatic oils out of our carrots and our onions and our celery, and we're going to get a much more robust sauce. Obviously, we got to add some liquid to this. My first one is demi-glace, which is a fancy way of saying really reduced beef stock, basically. This isn't always the easiest thing to find in the store. You can certainly find it in specialty markets, and if you don't have access to it, some reduced beef stock will work just fine. So we're going to add about half of this to our pan here, and this, more than anything, is just for added richness. So we're going to follow that up with some chicken stock, much lighter, and that's going to make up a great deal of our cooking liquid. And we have about 1 cup to 1.5 cups in here. Our final liquid is obviously our secret and most important ingredient here, and that's our Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola makes for really wonderful braising sauce liquids because it does two things. One, it's kind of acidic. And what that means for us in this particular case is that this very tough cut of meat, the beef chuck, is going to be tenderized not just from cooking, but also from the acid in this. It's going to help to break those muscle fibers down faster. And so rather than a pot roast that's going to cook in 12 hours, this is going to cook in about 2.5, maybe 3 hours. And so it speeds up that process tremendously. It also adds a little bit of sugar to it, and that sugar is going to produce browning. That's going to give us that deep, rich, almost glazed-like quality when this comes out of the oven. Not to mention the wonderful flavor that this adds to it. There's a lot of really beautiful aromatics that go into Coca-Cola, none of which, obviously, anyone's going to tell me about, but I can assure you that they're delicious, and those citric notes that are in there are going to add a lot of flavor to this. So, again, do not skimp on the Coca-Cola in this, and I prefer the Mexican Coca-Cola or the bottled Coca-Cola, what's still made with sugar. So let's take this back over to the stove. We're going to bring it up to a boil, and then we're going to pop it in our oven. Now, as this was already a hot pan, this isn't going to take very long. The main reason for bringing this back up to a boil before putting it into your oven is that if you put cold liquids into a pan and you put them into your oven, there's going to be a time adjustment that we can't ever quantify. We won't really know what it is. So, throw your lid on it. We can cut this off, and we're going to place this into a preheated 350-degree oven. The most important thing with recipes is to remember that they're guidelines. They're not written in stone. And so there's a little bit of judgment to this. We'll start checking it to make sure it's done at the 2.5-hour mark, and we'll pull it out just as soon as it reaches the point when this knife can be inserted into it cleanly and come out without any resistance. All right, guys, it's been about 3 hours now, and our pot roast is ready to go. I like to serve the pot roast with an assortment of local vegetables. Today I could get baby carrots, baby Hakurei turnips, and golden beets from a farm right around the corner from my house. But I encourage you to use whatever is seasonal and especially whatever is local to you. So feel free to switch it up. We've taken these and very simply prepared them by glazing them in a little bit of chicken stock and butter. And that's what I have in this pan right here. I also like to add a little bit of celery to the glazed vegetables as well. It mirrors what happens here in the braise. Now you can see when this comes out, those onions melt, those carrots melt down, the celery softens up. These guys have given their all. To serve it, very simple. We're going to pull this out of our pan, and look at that sauce that's on there. And that's all it really needs. You don't need a lot of additional sauce for this because it's just coated on there. And that's what the Coke does for it. That sugar that's added in there, that little bit of oomph, is what's going to give it this beautiful sort of glassy glaze. Now to the vegetables, just give these a little stir through here. So when we add these fresh local vegetables to this, this changes the dish entirely. I mean, we have the flavor of the vegetables and the sauce from the pot roast, but now we actually have these beautiful, fresh, delicious local vegetables on here. They still have their nutrients in them. They still have some texture, and it changes the dish entirely. So I hope you guys enjoy it. This is my Coca-Cola braised pot roast with glazed local vegetables. Enjoy.